project archivist here, and isn't this a good conference? Yes. Those three girls give me all the for the future. I really do. I am honored to introduce Dr. Ramona Beltran. Dr. Ramona Beltran, PhD, MSW, is an associate professor and the associate dean of research and faculty development at the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work. Her scholarship amplifies global initiatives in historical trauma and healing and storytelling methodologies that have been cited by researchers and practitioners alike. In her 20 years of professional and academic experience spanning the United States to New Zealand, she has worked alongside institutions and Native American and Indigenous Latinx communities, spotlighting solutions rather than problems towards healing our most pressing health issues. Her contributions have been invited by distinguished institutions, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Northwestern University, and Harvard University, as well as prominent cultural institutions, including the Denver Art Museum, History Colorado, and the Latino Cultural Arts Center. Dr. Beltran is a loving mother of three and is a multiracial Chicana of indigenous Mexican descent. She acknowledges that all the earth has an indigenous name and a community meant to steward it. Please welcome Dr. Ramona Beltran.
Ramona Beltran Teac, Inmala Ito in Consuela Castro Beltran Teac. May the Creator bless you all. My name is Ramona Beltran. My family is originally from northern Mexico, from a few places, Guaymas, Empalme, Durango, and also a really small village called Batuc. And they're also from Baja California, Triunfo and Santa Rosa Villa. That's my mother's side. On my biological father's side, I just learned, actually in 2022, that my ancestors from that side were originally from Northern Ireland. I don't know much about that side. It's new, but it's something that my children actually invited me to learn more about. And I was actually taught to acknowledge all of my ancestors, even the difficult ones, the unknown ones, the obscured ones, because that's the whole of who I am, and that is who is standing in front of you today. Full stories, lineages of brokenness, but beauty, of hope, and perseverance and creativity, all behind me, and definitely in front of me. Today, I just want to say that imposter syndrome does not go away. So those words from the student panelists really resonated with me, and I want to say I felt like that's a little bit of a hard act to follow too. They were so fierce, right? And just actually, I felt myself really emotional, but in the most beautiful kind of way, because I can see that these are the leaders coming along. This is the future. So thank you I can't find all of you, but thank you for your words. Thank you for giving us all hope. So I want to start with that. I also just want to acknowledge the fact that, I've been doing research on historical trauma and healing in Indigenous and Chicanx, Latinx communities for over 20 years. And I thought, well, what can I share with this community that they don't already know? Because I came to it because of my own lived experience, right? So, probably not a lot, but one of the things I feel like is a blessing for me is to be able to document what we do know and amplify what we do know. So my hope for today, and the thread is really about narrative and storytelling and the power of stories, is that you experience some of the things that I'll talk about as affirmation. And that maybe there's some tools that you'll be reminded of that you've always known, but that you can use in your everyday life. Before that, I want to focus on what I came here to do, which is to amplify joy. And I bringing that prayer here. And I want to share with you first some joy that I've had. And I want you to focus in on the tiny joys. Yesterday I was walking, it was like 97 degrees on campus, and I felt the warmth of the sun on my back. Just that moment felt like a joy. Over the weekend, my middle child turned 8, and we had her birthday party, which was interesting, lavender high tea. They're so creative. And we had indigenous drag queens come and do story time and a performance. And one of the queens, Buffalo Barbie, who's pretty famous in Colorado in the Denver area, she's fantastic. She learned one of my daughter's favorite songs, which is Roar by Katy Perry, and did her performance to that. And there was so much joy for all of us. We all got reminded that we need to remember that these creative, beautiful moments of connection heal us all. And so I just want to take a moment for you right now, for the people that you're sitting with, if you could just, for 1 minute, share one joy that you've had in the last few days, in the last week or 2 weeks. And then we'll come back together and get through the rest of this.
Mine's a little weird, but I have a black widow spider on our balcony, and she's got an egg sac, and my husband and I are learning so much about spiders and black widows, and I used to be so scared of them, and now I'm like, we're just gonna leave it alone. We're just gonna let it live. Yes. So.
Are you have you done time lapse?
No, I just noticed.
Spinning or
We just noticed because it's been too hot to go on the balcony because we're west facing and it's 90 to 95 degrees out.
not unless you're out at 2 a.m.
Right? So our basil plant has become the spider garden.
Wow, it's been a pretty traumatic few weeks. So I'm struggling with time. I'm alive.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Okay, let's take one more minute.
My husband brings me joy. She, for some reason, I think because she feels, we just lost my 95-year-old uncle tragically to a car. And so it's like she feels my sadness. So what brings me joy is her lovely. Ever since she was a puppy, I thought she would be more affectionate. But the last few weeks she has been, so then curling up and sleeping right next to me. Usually it's
I know that was really not enough time, but I hope that it's something that you will do throughout the rest of your day, and hopefully in the coming days too. Any chance we could hear just some quick joys? I'll say them out loud if folks wanna just yell them out. Baby hugged her. Yay! Yes! Oh, that's joy. What else? Couple more. Cleaning out your junk closet, yes, yes. I actually find joy in cleaning and organizing too, yes. How about one more? Baby hugs, cleaning.
Siberian Husky decided to finally start sleeping at my feet. In the bed, not on the floor.
Siberian Husky sleeping at your feet, so your feet are all warm. That is joy. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a little bit of my story. And there's some genealogists here. I'm a little intimidated. I'm a very amateur genealogist, but share with you what I found. And throughout the rest of the talk, I'm going to share stories from other people that have gotten permission to thinking so much about the way that narrative is being shaped and crafted right now against us. And I'm thinking a lot about how they want to take our joy, and they want to take the whole of who we are and boil us down to a single narrative that they have completely constructed. And they can't. They just can't. They won't, they haven't, they never will. And part of the way that they won't is because we gather like this and we tell our stories, we insist on our stories, we insist on celebrating and connecting and seeing the interconnectedness of one another, and we insist on joy. So, yeah. So moving on, I want to share a little bit of my family story. So I love sharing this picture. This is my great-great-grandmother, Raquel Ibarra Duarte Quinn. And this is in Arizona. She's posing next to a giant saguaro cactus, which makes me feel like home, even though I haven't lived there. But when I go to Arizona, I feel a sense of peace because I know that's where my ancestors settled once they crossed the border and probably started to find peace themselves. I love this picture because she's wearing this like fabulous furry coat, and I just imagine her as this glamorous indigenous woman. This is like in the 20s, and I just love showing this picture to really demonstrate how like just complex we are. We're not just what like Edward Curtis, took pictures of indigenous people in a singular way. We are so much more than that. This is a picture of my great-great-grandmother, Placido Trejo Gwen, and this is definitely taken in Arizona. He was a miner, and I know it's taken in Arizona because all of his children are with him, and they never went back to Mexico after they came here, and a couple of them were born in Arizona. And the shorty in the very middle, that's my great-grandmother, Zoila. This is a border crossing manifest that I found for when Placido brought the family all over to Arizona. I know it's really hard to see. And this was in 1913. He's described as dark, and he has a scar on his left temple. Apparently, according to this document, couldn't read or write except for to sign his name. And when I think about this document, I think about this as a colonial gaze, right? And we rely on documents so often in Western genealogy and Western forms of archive keeping to tell us the truth. And I don't know that there's a full truth here. I'm filling things in. But the way that he's described, and the way that people are described later in census documents, in border manifests, is so colonial, right? It is somebody who is recording the person who is crossing, and it's their gaze and their interpretation. And I just find that fascinating. And also one of the reasons why we all need to be doing this work, so that we can be the ones documenting the stories, documenting probably small t truths, but maybe getting closer. So Placido died when he was only 46 from silicosis and pneumonia from working in the mines his whole life. He died in Guadalupe and is buried in Guadalupe. And soon after he was born, the family had to move. So my great-grandmother, Zoila, met my great-grandfather, Leonzo, down there. He was working on the railroads, and Zoila was making tortillas and selling them to the workers. And he had an accident on the railroad and ended up having to leave that work and move into agricultural work, which took them west to California. And that's my tata, Leonzo Jr., in we moved up to Southern Oregon when I was only 4 years old because there was gun violence outside my house, and my mom was like, "That's it, we're leaving." And little did I know what I was in for, moving to a small rural white town. But I'm grateful to her for what she did to protect us. And then this is a picture of 4 generations. That's my Nana Ramona, that's her mother, my great-grandmother Chayo, my mom Consuela, and me. So I'm sharing all of this with you because I'm so grateful and honored to be a part of my ancestors' journey. And I think about our ancestors as the original futurists. They're the ones who had us in mind, right? Everything that they did was about bringing us here into this moment, about love and ensuring that we would have a place to call home, that we would have family and care. It's also a cultural protocol. In addition to telling you who I am, it's a narrative intervention, and it's also a way that we name and claim ourselves. Who you are, who are your ancestors, is a first part of that protocol, that narrative intervention. It helps us to create connection and to build trust from the beginning, right? If we just know where someone's coming from, then it helps us to feel more open to welcome them. We are introducing ourselves, we're announcing our lineage, we're showing our intentions. Through that introduction, you share who you are. In that spirit, I also want to take this moment to acknowledge the original people of the land upon which we are currently standing: Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, Apache, Comanche, and all of our ancestors that are with us here, who maybe are not named in official introductions or acknowledgements, and all Indigenous peoples who have called this place their home. We know that this was a major thoroughfare. Not that long ago, actually just a few weeks ago, I was in Browning on the Blackfeet Reservation with an elder, and he said, Ramona, in our language we have a word for monkey and parrot. Do you see any monkeys or parrots around here? And he was talking about the connection between Northern Native nations and our Southern Native nations, and how we have always traveled and shared with one another. I also want to acknowledge and honor the land itself, Iñaki Itomai, or Tonantzin, Mother Earth, for providing, for sustaining, and for being the example of how we must live in relation to one another. I also want to acknowledge the Black liberators, all of our ancestors who built the infrastructure of the land that we're on. Everybody who's currently fighting for our relatives in Palestine, the activists, the organizers, I want to acknowledge all of you, us. As we verbalize our acknowledgement of land and peoples, we're announcing ourselves again as relatives, but the important component of that is we're holding ourselves accountable to one another's history, healing, and liberation. Land acknowledgements of people are not just words. They must correspond to the actions that align with the accountability within our deep, deep interconnectedness, just like the students were talking about. That's the second strategy. So the first one, name and claim, who are you? Who are you? Who are your people? The second strategy, acknowledge the land and liberators, as long as you're able to align your actions with the practice. So we learn and we lean into place. It's a truth that everywhere you go in this country and everywhere was and is native land, is indigenous land. Wherever you are, there's a history waiting to be excavated and shared. It's the time these truths are no longer sitting in the shadows. That's why they're trying so hard to erase our narratives. The elders predicted this. In 2012, I had elders come up from Mexico. I was still living in Seattle. And they were talking about, do you remember 2012? People were talking about the end of the world, the Mayan calendar, all that stuff. And of course, we know it wasn't that. But the elder was talking about how it was an end of the particular count of the calendar, right? And that it was the beginning of a new world. It was the beginning of a new count. that what we would see was the move away from industrialization, the masculine, patriarchy, and anthropocentrism, and that we would be moving into a more feminine expression of the earth and the earth-based knowledge. We would be moving away from individualism and toward collectivism. And they said, just like, you know, on the Aztec calendar, there's the Olin symbol that means movement. They said, it would come with a lot of strife, and that there would be a lot of struggle, there would be pushback, and that we would see the rise of this new time with a lot of, like, they're going down fight for the old. And I just see it everywhere. And so I want us to remember, this is a part of prophecy, this is part of what our elders have always told us. But students, scholars, community leaders, you can bring these things into your practice. You can bring this knowledge into your practice. Take your kiddos outside, have them connect with the land and the history of the land, and you see something magical happen. Whenever I take my students outside of the classroom and we go someplace and we think about what happened there, who was there, what history lives there, it's like they actually get the knowledge inside their cells, and it's so powerful. I do want to take a moment here, though, and acknowledge that there are many of us who don't know our histories. That was by design, right? From adoption to histories of enslavement or strategies used to protect families from the horrible conditions of our past, the silence, part of that historical trauma. This is real. That's a painful source of trauma. So the practice of naming and claiming, acknowledging your ancestors may feel out of reach, but I think there are still ways to engage the spirit of this, which is to acknowledge that past, even to acknowledge that you don't know, and that that's a part of telling the truth of history, and that you're in a process of learning, reconnecting, of healing. And if that's too much, we can also acknowledge our chosen family, our creative and cultural communities in the here and now. I want to also share gratitude. Number 3. Gratitude is an affirmation of goodness, an appreciation of the gifts and support we've received outside of ourselves. It's an emotion that strengthens our bonds and relationships in communities. It motivates us toward mutual aid and care. I ask that our ancestors remind us of the many things for which we have to be grateful. Let's give thanks for what is good. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to Aztlán futures, to the generations to come, to the continued imagining of our Indigenous and Chicane relatives to come, to the work you do to transform these systems with such limitation. Thank you for showing up, even when it feels risky. And so I just want to ask you to take just a moment to offer your own gratitude in a moment of mindfulness. When I was in ceremony, the elder said that the offering of gratitude is one of our strongest and most important prayers. And so I think that's also a narrative intervention, right? We can cut through the negatives that are dominating discourse by just saying, I'm so grateful. Thank you, Creator, for another beautiful day of life. Thank you for this gathering. So from here on out, I'm going to talk a little bit about historical trauma and healing. I'm a stickler for definitions in narrative. So everybody in here, right, show of hands, has heard historical trauma, heard of it, and do you feel like you know what it is? You really know what it is? You feel, okay, great, good. Okay, so I'm just gonna share a little bit, I won't go too deep into it, and I'll buzz through some of this. But one thing I've noticed about historical trauma and healing and people talking about generational trauma is decontextualizing it and like using it sometimes, to only highlight the sort of sit there. I've had several people critique some of my work, which thank you for the additional citations, but they've critiqued my work and the definition of historical trauma because they say that it's like really focused on, you know, negative things, that it paints us in a way that we are, you know, described by our trauma. And actually, the definition of historical trauma, I believe, is really to truth tell. We have to acknowledge the trauma. We have to acknowledge the colonial past, and we need to name specifically what it is, because it's happening now, right? And we can name it and identify it. But what's a really important part of that is we've actually also, as historical trauma and healing, we've also acknowledged and documented through science the ways that our communities have either interrupted or softened that transmission of intergenerational trauma through our culture, through our language, through our traditions, through our reclaiming and recreating some of our ceremonies, learning our indigenous languages, those kinds of things. I'm going to share a video that will talk about the definition of historical trauma and healing and narrative specifically, and then we'll move into more narrative interventions. So this video that I'm going to show, we created in 2019 with Ingenuity, which is a native production company out of the Bay Area, and it, you know, one of the points that the students made earlier was about the inaccessibility of concepts and ideas and research. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this was to get this theoretical framework out into community, to have it be accessible, to have it be understandable in ways that we can relate to. And so we put this together. It's basically the story, a boarding school experience from a Navajo elder, and then a little bit of me talking about the definition. It won awards, which I'm really happy to say. But I want to just let you know from a trauma-informed care perspective that it does describe and capture visually violence against Native people. So if you need to take a moment, it's about 6 minutes. But here we go. Sound is not working. Hold please. Sorry.
So historically traumatic events.
Here we go.
Historical trauma is defined as a collective and cumulative wounding across generations that results from massive catastrophic events targeting a community. So historically traumatic events would be forced removal, relocation, boarding schools, slavery. There's almost uncountable massacres in the United States against Native people, and that doesn't even begin to count what happened across the border, across the many borders. There's a whole body of science now that's beginning to show that the experiences of our environments actually become embodied. They can impact the genetic material surrounding our DNA. So the trauma is held personally as well as collectively, and it can be passed on through the generations.
I remember the day that I was taken to Greyhound in Crown Point, New Mexico. I was 12 years old, whole line of buses were in line when we went to the trading post, and that's where they put us in the bus and didn't tell us where we're going. I was crying, my mother was crying, my dad was angry, and I know that my mom had the roughest time with that. A lot of people that were there bringing their children were upset, and I was scared, confused. All of us were, and they took us. To this day, I remember my mom standing there crying. And we end up in a place called Inner Mountain, and that was in Utah. We were told that the way you live and the way you believe is not acceptable by us. You need to cut your hair. You cannot speak Navajo anymore. You're going to learn how to speak English. I had long hair, and it got cut. The sadness that I felt, it was painful. I couldn't sleep. I was scared that something would happen while I'm asleep. I felt like I lost everything in terms of my family, my relatives, and I was in the middle of this place where even if I was to run away, I didn't know which way to go. I remember some people hanging themselves in the dormitory and things like that. Some kids ran away and didn't make it home. A lot of people got sick. I remember a few times that I was in trouble only because I opened my mouth to say something now. But you know, that did not affect me physically, but it affected me emotionally because I began to think like, what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. But no matter what they said to me, I knew who I was. The teaching from my dad was very strong to the point where I think that kept me going all these years. At some point you have to make up your mind that you're going to be in pain the rest of your life. You got to search around, how do I get rid of it? There's ways to do that. But a lot has to do with spirituality. You'll never forget what happened, but you'll be in charge of that healing.
We actually have our own mechanisms to interrupt that intergenerational transmission of trauma in a way that gets at the source of the wound. Narrative is one of the ways that we interrupt that direct line of the trauma to the outcome. And story for Indigenous people is in our way of being. So we dance, we pray, and we speak, and we tell our stories. And we create things new. We define what being Indigenous is now. Who we are is completely up to us.
Just the kind of fixation on the term history as if it's something that's only in the past. And Maria Braithwaite, who is one of the people who really coined the term, especially as it relates to Indigenous peoples, I got to do a panel with her, and she talked about how for her community, history is yesterday. History is now. History is tomorrow. It's above and below. And we're creating it in this moment. And that's why I think the term is so resonant for us, because we understand that while some of those historically traumatic events are anchored in the past, they're a part of a continuum, right? They're a part of a shape-shifting sort of colonial approach to try and suppress us and our cultures. But one thing that has come out of community recently is this really important idea that if we're going to then this more recently coming out of TLS Nunavut, if trauma can be inherited from one generation to the next, then so can love, resilience, and wisdom. And as I said, narrative is one of the ways that we can really shape and transmit that wisdom. This quote comes from Leslie Marmon Silko's Ceremony. If you haven't read it, it's incredible. I use it in my historical trauma and healing class as part of our journey. And this is the very beginning. And it's setting the stage for the rest of the story. But I will tell you something about stories. They aren't just entertainment. Don't be fooled. They're all we have to fight off illness and death. You don't have anything if you don't have stories. So social science research is showing the power of narrative in interrupting that transmission of intergenerational trauma in Native and Indigenous communities, and increasingly in Mexican American Indians and Indigenous Latine communities, we're seeing these same sort of outcomes. Danza is one thing, learning our Indigenous languages, acknowledging and integrating our original foods. These are ways that people are healing. From Christine Lowry, she says, we have come from similar places and we use these places to solidify our relationships with one another. Some of us recognize each other in the stories we tell. And when we're no longer together, we take our joining narratives with us. And she, I cannot remember her tribal nation, but she's a Native scholar, and she is basically talking about the ways that shared narratives across Indigenous communities is also a form of healing. Storytelling is essential to humanity. It is, and always has been, I think, our most readily available technology. It's how we learn to live in right relationship with ourselves, the community, and each other, the planet, and the cosmos. It's also how we construct and create new meanings, new imaginings, the futurism that lives in our stories. And many Indigenous scholars have called for research with Indigenous communities to be regarded as sacred or ceremonial processes. That means we really need to engage with the whole of the research process with a deep commitment to respect relational accountability and reciprocity. So embracing these principles, we developed the Our Stories, Our Medicine Archive project. And in this project, we are conducting in-depth oral histories and cultural artifact documentation with Native, Indigenous Latine, and Chicanoa X communities to both preserve traditional cultural health knowledge and also to document our own solutions to our most pressing health needs. We created this project because over the course of many projects, over many years, it was a clear request from the community. We need our own space, we need to tell our own stories in our own way, and we are not only our historical and intergenerational trauma. Yes, we need to tell that truth, but we are so much more. We are also our inherited wisdom. We are dynamic, creative, innovative scholars, teachers, artists, and so much more. The original futurists. We are living proof of that. So we began by sitting in circle for a solid year. Every other week we would gather around Dr. Deb Ortega's table, one of my mentors there at DU, with snacks and tissues. Because there was always laughter and there was always tears. Using a Four Seasons ethnography and story as our guide, we would ask our questions. Tell us a medicine story, a dream story, a birth story. In addition to the tears and the laughter, which always accompanied us, it was also always transformative for those of us at the table. We understood that as we asked and told our stories, we were doing much more than observing. We were in an intimate process of unfolding. Our stories were all meeting at this table and creating something new in each of us. We were witnessing. In her digital storytelling work with Métis elders, Métis scholar and filmmaker Judy Isaac describes witnessing as a process which may include acts of remembrance, in which a survivor of trauma and colonization looks back to reinterpret and recreate a relationship to the past in order to understand the future. She describes 3 levels of witnessing. The first is the storyteller as a witness to themselves and their own recollections of an experience or event. The second level is being a witness within the process of sharing testimony. And the third level level is being a witness in the process of witnessing the testimony of others. This is our methodology. We adapted and embraced this idea of multi-level witnessing because it pedagogically reminds us of talking circles or ceremonial pláticas, creating a circular, relational, brave space in which we can speak freely from our hearts, but also be held at the same time. That means there's usually 3 of us in an interview, and it's resource intensive, but it's really worth it for the community we're able to build around story in such a short time. So I'm going to share a couple stories. I know we're getting low on time here. I'll share a couple stories from the community so you can see how that circular methodology invited them into speaking from their hearts. So I'm going to start with sharing a story from Comadre Olga, who's talking about medicine. Can you hear that? Sorry, technology. I don't know how to pause it on here.
Bless you.
Medicine is anything that heals not just our body, but our spirit, that centers us, that reminds us of our power and our potential. I think of things like, example, I think of as a child, my grandmother who used to be, now we talk about cannabis and there's controversy. I remember she had like a jar of rubbing alcohol, she'd have marijuana in there. I remember the kids would be like, oh, marijuana. Because back then it was like those marijuanos, the drug addicts, the ones you don't want to talk to. But I always saw it as medicine. I never actually saw anyone smoke it or use it for anything other than. And so for me, it was part of medicine. She'd rub it on my legs. I used to, especially as I was getting older and going through big changes in puberty and start getting cramps and that kind of thing. So she would apply it on my legs. It was for sore muscles, and I remember that would take the pain away. And so I think of medicine as things that come from the earth. I remember her visiting us and going to our garden and just picking things. And to me, it was just grass. I didn't know the difference. And she'd say, this is good for this and this is good for that. And then she'd turn it into lotion or shampoo or some kind of tincture for whatever. And I wish I would have spent time learning. I still can. She's very much alive. But those are the kinds of things that I think of as medicine. I think of being able to be in community where you are seen and heard. That is part of medicine too, that connectedness. Knowing who we are is part of our medicine. When we've been exposed to conversation for hundreds of years that have told us that we shouldn't even be alive. And when we can proclaim we're here, be proud, and preserve our ways, our traditions, our ceremonies. To me, that's very much medicine. When I'm feeling my worst, I go into sweat lodge, or I ask for a ceremony. And then I see my community come and show up in a circle in that space around the fire, and I know I'm safe, and I know that I'm cared for and loved, and I feel the presence of my ancestors there. So for me, that is that medicine, or having an altar in my home where I can speak to my ancestors and not break that connection. That is part of my medicine. That's what feeds me with life. That's what keeps my fire going.
to give you your assignment, which is you were the third level witnesses. So I was wondering if, as you were listening, if there was something that struck you, anything that resonated with you. Did you see some of yourself in that story? Yes. So this relative's grandmother used to do the same thing with the marijuana in the jar? Yeah. Cool. What else? Yeah.
My grandmother used to also use the camphor in the bottle with the whiskey as well, and use that as a rubbing mechanism as
So her grandfather mixed camphor and whiskey as a way to soothe wounds or sore
well.
muscles.
And a lot of, I come from a Native American, I'm from the Pedro Maxwell tribe, so we use a lot of those herbs and we were taught all that. So we use a lot of osha too, the osha,
Yeah.
and a lot of the ultra medicines for sicknesses, making long.
Yes.
And
Yes.
things like that.
So this relative was talking about the herbs that they used in their tribal community, and the remedios that were just really common, like osha, also known as bear root. So really thrilled to share with you that the OSOMA archive has documented over 100 of these remedies and personal stories around them, and they're all on that archive website. Were there any other things that were resonant? Yes.
So we too have always used the marijuana and alcohol for pain, alcohol pain relief. But I think what stood out the most to me is when she mentioned how she wishes she would have, in those moments, paid more closer attention to what her grandmother was going through.
Yeah.
She acknowledged all she still can. And that to me, it really stood out because I only have one grandparent left, my grandfather. And I shared that like wishful or that regret of wishing to have paid more attention in those moments that were very valuable. And I think that's so important. So I always tell people, no matter what your family dynamics are or your relationship with your elders, it's important to sit with them and listen to their stories. And because with those stories comes, you gain knowledge, and it's really important.
Yeah, that's right. If you couldn't hear that, there was also marijuana used for muscles in your traditions, but also really connecting with that sense of regret of not paying more close attention when you're learning, and then just this desire to teach other people to pay close attention when our elders are talking, just how important that knowledge is. Because that's how we learn, and then that's how we pass it on to the future generations. I summarized it. Okay, awesome. So, yeah, I'm not gonna, we're basically out of time. So I don't wanna take more of your time. We got started a little bit late, so I'm running just a little bit over, but can you put the website back up? Oh, it's fine, just put the, yeah. Technology. Trust me, I've been working on something technology for like 5 years, and I didn't know if I'd make it. So by now I'm just like, go with the flow. Okay. Yeah. So just in terms for the researchers and the archivists in the room, just to tell you a little bit about what we did to get here. We conducted 51 in-depth oral history interviews with Native and Indigenous Latinx communities, over 100 hours of audio video footage. The shortest interview was 2 hours. We have documented over 100 traditional remedies, and we're continuing to catalog traditional health practices. What I love about this, though, is it's so dynamic and creative, and the remedios are things from the past, but also things created in the here and now, and it's so powerful. But we're seeing that we have our own evidence-based practices, right? So related to chronic diseases, traditional approaches, Western approaches are around diet, mindfulness, stress management, movement, community, less community. But we have added community and social cohesion as well as ceremony, among other other things that we call remedios as well. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of a narrative from a relative who lives in Tunisia right now. His name is Mark Gonzalez. He's an educator and poet. And hold on, I gotta find the book. Sorry. I was gonna start with this one, but the book opened to a different one, and I think I feel compelled to share this. He published this book 10 years ago, so it's the 10-year anniversary, interestingly, during the first Trump administration, and it's called In Times of Terror, Wage Beauty. So in terms of thinking about storytelling as our technology, as our way to cultivate joy, creativity, resistance, and assert and insist on our being. I love using poetry and any kind of creative mode of expression. And I use this book in my class, and I totally recommend it. It's like a balm for the soul. And they're just these mini chapters that he basically created from series of Twitter posts. This chapter is called Change the Story, Change the Game. Before one can shift social discourse, they must engage what a story is, why collections of them matter to people, and how to author one that speaks to the heart in ways that fear cannot silence. Every word is a portal into understanding. Shape your vocabulary in a way that maximizes possibility. Be aware of how the language you use can be counterproductive to the world your vision is attempting to grow. Reaction is so 20th century. Upgrade your stories, upgrade your language. For my prayer for us is this: there will come a day where we learn that a language of growth fits our souls far better than a language of resistance. Look back across time. We were not designed to resist, but to create and affirm. A newborn does not enter this life with a desire to heal, but to thrive and activate their fullest potential. I just saw Mark the other day, and we were talking about the power of narrative and how important it is for us to be really insisting on spaces. As we know, those folks are spending billions of dollars to craft narratives. These spaces are so powerful and so important. So I'll just end here with a couple reminders and affirmations. You are who your ancestors sang about in their ceremonies. You are their revolutionary prayer. You are their sacred gift to the world. And then to take it to the Chicana. You are the cumulative expression of all your ancestors. And then we won't have time to do this today, but I want to invite you, by the end of the day maybe, to do a story activity. And that is to create your 6-word story that captures how you are feeling from being in this space today. And I Am My Ancestors' Wildest Dream is an example. So just to talk about the things that we talked about today, the concrete tools and practices that you can take into your research, into your community activism, into your kitchen table. Name and claim, who are your people, in whatever way it fits for you. Acknowledge the land and the liberators. Give resources, give gratitude, give thanks for what is good. Learn the language and the definitions so you have the knowledge and the power to shape discourse. We didn't really get to go into more of the practice solutions, but they were woven throughout. And then to remember that story work is always available to us. Any small creative prompts, those poems I am from, Those are really good prompts. 6 2, 4, 12-word stories are good ways. And I'm happy to share additional story work prompts if anybody wants. I'll hang around for a little bit. And then I have a really bad shameless plug. We're still working on our OSOMA project, and we actually are doing a really great survey on the project to see how people engage with stories. So if you want to learn more about OSOMA and participate in the survey for a $50 gift card, blah, blah, we're recruiting. So let me know, and I'll take your email, and we just need like 10 more people, and we'll be at the end powerful enough to demonstrate how we engage with stories. And what I'm helping to do here is have some empirical evidence for what we know about the power of story. Anyway, that's that. Chiokwe Utasia, thank you so much. Sorry about the technology issues and the delays, but I'm just really grateful to have had time with you today, and I hope the rest of your day is beautiful. Chiokwe Utasia.
Thank you so much, Ramona. I don't want to cut out questions, so let's take at least one or two questions if there's any from the audience.
Okay, I guess mine is kind of somewhat a question. Hi, my name is Exel Hernandez, and I was kind of interested to know if you're aware of how huge generational trauma is on the TikTok social media platform.
I am not. I am not on TikTok.
You may want to check it out because that's actually how I learned about generational trauma. It's like it's not necessarily a trend, but it's a huge like topic on it, and everyone is posting their videos on how they're breaking generational traumas, including the stuff that you talked about, like slavery is going through, or even just some things where like people are talking about how they're traumatized from their parents whipping them with like a belt and stuff like that. A lot of new parents are showing them approaching their little ones with the belt in their hand, doing the snapping sound, and their kid runs right up to them, and in reality they use this belt as a swing.
Oh, wow.
So they're showing how they're breaking those
Whoa.
generational traumas.
Fascinating.
Just wanted to share that.
Thanks. Oh, so I'm glad to hear it's more than just the couple memes I found. Yeah, social media stresses me way out for many narrative reasons. But I'm glad to hear that it's being used for good too. Yay! Yay! Thank you.
Any other questions? One more. All right. Thank you so much, Ramona. As Dr. Beltran mentioned, she'll stick around, so if anyone is interested in learning more about her research and her project, she'll be available to answer questions. We'll take a short, maybe 5-minute break. There's coffee and churros.